The Nation Bojinasi, we are focusing on health issues as it is a Monday today. And with me in studio, I'm joined by Karen Moss, founder and director of Steps SA, joining us to talk about clubfoot. Steps SA is a social enterprise working for the alleviation of clubfoot within the Southern Africa region. If you have questions, comments, do call us. The number is 021 448 6266, 021 448 6266, or send an SMS to 32158. 32158. It costs R1. Remember, free SMSs do not apply. Karen, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Firstly, just briefly about Steps SA. I believe you founded the organization. What prompted the move?
My son was born with clubfoot 10 years ago. He was born in January 2003, and we were facing quite radical surgery on his feet, and just by sheer luck, I found out about a different method that was available in America. It had been done in America for over 50 years. It was developed by a doctor called Ignacio Ponseti, who was a Spanish man living in America, in Iowa, and he was an orthopedic surgeon, and he decided after doing assessments on club feet that had surgery that he was going to try and find another way to do it. And we flew with our son there, and within 3 casts his feet were completely straight. He didn't have any surgery. He had very minor procedure to snip his Achilles tendon, which heals within 2 weeks. And that was that. And I just thought, well, you know, I was the first South African that had contacted him and been there, and he said to me that I should try and get the method into South Africa, and that's how it all started.
So is it available now in South Africa?
Yes, I started Steps in 2005, having already spoken to quite a few doctors, a couple of them who had done some training in America. But because I had launched a clubfoot website at the end of 2003, I had a lot of parents contacting me looking for help. So I thought the next step would be to find a way of training more doctors in South Africa. And I started Steps in 2005 and started fundraising. And in 2006 we held our first Ponseti training. 3 doctors came from overseas, trained, I think it was between 50 and 60 orthopedic surgeons came. They were pediatrics, so they'd specialize in children. And that was really where it started to really grow, because we managed to get doctors from most of the main centers, and a lot of them were academic doctors teaching in the hospitals, big hospitals. And I'm pleased now that we have really very good coverage over South Africa. There's still some areas that are not necessarily that well covered in the smaller regions and rural areas, but in the big centres there's very good Ponseti clinics in most of the big hospitals.
I remember in primary school we had some one of our classmates who had clubfoot, and obviously there was no help for her. She had to just continue.
Unfortunately, there's still cases like that in South Africa, and they tend to be children in the rural areas that live far from big centres, and the treatment has to be done weekly. What happens is they gently manipulate the foot, put it into a POP, plaster cast, and then the following week it's removed, and then they remanipulate the foot. And usually, if the child is small enough, young enough, it reacts very quickly to the treatment, and within 1.5 to 2 months, the feet are completely straight. The problem is that parents who are either unemployed, or they've got to give up a day of work to get to this clinic far away, or they don't even have the money for transport. These are the children that unfortunately don't get the treatment that they need. And sometimes parents aren't even aware that it can be treated. This is why this World Clubfoot Day that we're celebrating today is so important, to get the word out to parents. First of all, it's not your fault. If your child is born with clubfoot, it's something that happens. It's genetic and environmental and combination. No one really knows why. And secondly, it can be corrected. It can be cured.
But now, what causes clubfoot? Because I believe it affects an alarming number of babies.
They don't seem to have come up with a definitive reason yet. They're doing a lot of research in America and in the UK. But there doesn't seem to be there is some kind of genetic link, but they don't know yet what it is. No one has actually come up with a study that says this is what causes clubfoot. There used to be a belief that it was from being cramped. The baby didn't have enough room to develop. This is not really a true clubfoot.
Oh, really?
That's actually just called a positional clubfoot, and it normally comes right on its own without much casting or anything is really needed. But proper congenital clubfoot is actually it's a deformity. It's a developmental deformity that happens within the second 3 months of pregnancy, in the second trimester, and the foot actually turns in. So it's a deformity of the foot based on the ankle bones actually being turned, so that the foot is basically upside down and turned in. And if it's not corrected, a child will not be able to walk. Or if they do walk, they walk on the tops of their feet, so they're disabled.
It looks painful.
It is painful if it's not corrected. The Ponseti method is very gentle. It's hard on the parents, though, because you've got a baby in cast that has to be, you can't bath them. Then after the foot is corrected, they have to sleep with a little foot brace on, which is a pair of shoes attached to a bar. Because what happens with clubfoot is that people don't realize that whatever caused it to turn in while the baby was developing is still active, and babies' feet are very supple, and it can actually turn back in. There's a very high chance of recurrence.
Really?
So the brace stops that happening in most cases, but it's hard on the parents because they've got to get their child to sleep in a pair of shoes attached to a bar, and there are issues around that, and parents feel guilty about it and they feel bad for their children. But really, having been through it myself, my child doesn't remember anything about it. He's had a very active life already. He plays a lot of sport. He runs around. He's like any normal little boy. And those 3 or 4 years that I spent making sure his feet were straight, he'll never think about that. It's much harder on the parents to deal with. But there is a final solution to it.
Now, the Ponseti method, is it not expensive in South Africa?
Well, in the clinics, it's actually available for free, because any child under the age of 5, by law, has to get treatment. Plus, it's also what they call a prescribed minimum benefit, a PMB condition, which also means it has to be corrected for free. So the actual cost of the treatment for a person without medical aid is minimal, but as I said, the transport costs and the other associated costs are expensive. What's so good about the Ponseti method is it doesn't even have to be done by a surgeon. It can be done by an OT, a physio, a nurse, if they're properly trained, which makes it ideal for Africa, because there's a shortage of orthopedic surgeons in our neighbouring countries. And when we train people, they can actually do it without having a surgeon. So it's cost effective, it's quick, it's cheap. POP is available in most hospitals. There's no special equipment needed. And in fact, the shoes, we've trained workshops to make the shoes here. And they're just made very simply with pieces of leather and a bit of metal, and they cost sort of under 500 Rand to make, whereas the imported ones are 5,000-6,000 Rand. So it can be well managed, and the treatment is not necessarily that expensive.
Interesting.
And if you think of the cost of disability and the cost that a disabled person gives to the community by having to support them, and what the family goes through, and that person cannot actually maybe earn a full living or lead a life where they can go and walk to collect water and have a get to school and that type of thing, then it's actually the costs are really minimal.
You're on Push Radio 89.5 FM. In studio we do have Karen Moss, founder and director of Steps SA, talking to us about clubfoot. If you have questions, comments, do call us. The number is 021 448 6266, 021 448 6266, or send an SMS to 32158. 32158. It costs 1 Rand. Remember, free SMSs do not apply. Now, Karen, in terms of Steps SA, I believe you're working towards the alleviation of clubfoot. How do you assist? What is your role?
Well, having worked quite successfully to get the method into most places in the country, the next step is to support the families and the patients, because as I mentioned, the parents are very much involved in this, and in a busy clinic, there's not always the time to spend explaining to the parents why, what their child has, that the causes, although we don't know the causes, but to explain that to them, and then also just to kind of not really counsel them, but to educate and to give information on what the clubfoot treatment will consist of, what kind of involvement they need to have in it, because they need to be very involved. So what we've part of our program that we started, we got an American partner called Miracle Feet. They do what we do, but they do it worldwide, and they look for partners within countries. We developed a training program that people can be trained on in the hospitals to actually provide information to parents and advice, and also developing posters and things that parents can take home with them to read, or actually they're quite visual as well, with tips on how to handle when your child's in a cast, and explaining various stages of the treatment. So we are focused quite strongly now on trying to get the follow-up in place, because what we've found is, although the clubfoot gets corrected, there's sometimes quite a high dropout rate, because people can't keep on coming to the clinic, or they think the foot's corrected, they don't have to go anymore, but they don't understand that the braces are essential. So this is the weak area that we're addressing now.
From day one, when I take my child to the hospital and then they do the Ponzetti method, how long does it take before the foot can be okay? Now it's fine, the braces can be out, the foot is corrected.
Most people prefer that you wear the brace at night. It's only slept in until the child is 4 years old. They used to say 2 years old, then 3 years old, but there were still recurrences. If children really don't tolerate it, they can come out earlier, but then you have to really keep an eye on what is going on with the foot and look out for early signs of relapse. It sounds quite tough to have your child in a brace, but when they're first in it, they're in it 23 hours a day for 3 months, but they're babies, so they don't, they roll around, they're not walking. By the time the child is standing and bearing weight, they are only wearing that brace when they sleep. So their normal development is not changed in any way by wearing the brace. In fact, they normally get very strong stomach muscles because they're lifting the brace up, and it can be quite heavy. And it's quite amazing. You'll see that children can crawl and walk around with this brace on. They're very resilient and adaptable. So it's a hard thing for a parent to think about when the baby is very young, but it actually goes past quite quickly. And at the end of the 4 years, you are assured of 95% success rate in having your child with completely straight, functional feet.
Now, if the child relapses, can it still be operated on?
It can. What they normally do, the sign of a relapse is they start to put a lot of weight on the outside of their foot, and their toe starts to turn in, and the ankle's actually turning in again. If you get it early, normally 2-3 casts will straighten the foot again, and then they can go back into the brace and keep on wearing it. And if that doesn't work, if the parents can't keep the brace on for whatever reason, and the foot relapses again, you get a small percentage of club feet that are very resistant and more complex than a typical club foot. And what they will do then is they will do a minor operation where they move a tendon over and sort of clip it down so it stops the foot from turning in. But that operation is not as invasive as the old style of clubfoot surgery, so there's no big problems of scar tissue and arthritis and other joint and bone problems that would have come in with the old style of surgery. So when they normally do that when a child is 3 or 4 years old.
Now, in terms of the child, they do live a normal life. Like after that 4 years, the feet are straight, they can do absolutely anything.
And they don't have to wear special shoes. They don't have to do any specific exercises. It's quite nice to keep their feet stretched so they can do like jump on a trampoline or on a bicycle, stretch their feet, because that keeps the Achilles tendon, which is at the back of the heel, nice and stretched, because that's the one part that can also relapse. It can start to pull the heel up again. So the brace does take care of that, but some children just got a tighter tendon than others, and that kind of thing does help. But they can literally be barefoot when they're not in the brace. They can run around. They can do whatever any other child would do during those 4 years. And then after that, in some extreme cases, there will be children that will still relapse or have problems. But the nice thing about Ponzetti is that you can keep on using a gentle method to try and get it as right as possible for this 5% of children that do have issues. And only right at the end would you then do some surgical intervention, but it's normally not as invasive as it would have been if you'd just done straight off the top without much casting.
Interesting. Now today it is World Clubfoot Day. In terms of the awareness, Karen, would you say there is enough awareness, or we still have a long way to go?
I think we still have a long way to go. I think when you think of the incidence of clubfoot in South Africa, and Southern and East Africa, we have the second highest rate in the world. The only other country higher than us, or region, is Polynesia. we get more or less two children per every 1,000 born, which is more than Down syndrome and cleft palate figures. So it's common. It's the most common musculoskeletal defect there is the clubfoot. But most people don't know much about it. Even when my son was born, I didn't know much about it. I had to go and research it. And I think what needs to happen is that people need to understand it, and this is where the awareness can play a part, understanding that it's not your fault, understanding that it can be cured or corrected so that the child can walk, and that it doesn't have to be a bad news story. It can have a happy ending. And I think the more that people speak about it, the less of a stigma it will have. I've had families where the child has either been abandoned or the father's left, or yes, there's been cases in rural areas where that's happened because the child has a disability, of clubfoot, and this doesn't need to happen. If there's more awareness out there, it could change that completely for that child's life.
Any myths around it?
I believe there are both positive and negative myths. I've been told that in some communities it's believed to be like if you have a clubfoot, it's almost like a mark of either ancestors cursing you, or it can be the other alternative where they actually believe that child has special gifts. Seems to vary from place to place, so there's no definitive. There's other myths around the world of different clubfoot stories, which is quite interesting, but generally I would say in literature and in myths it generally has a negative connotation, clubfoot, which is obviously it's a skeletal thing. There's nothing else. That's the other thing about clubfoot, is the most club feet are just club feet. There's nothing else wrong with the child. There's no syndrome. Occasionally there are some things that clubfoot is one of the symptoms of that, but normally it is what it's called idiopathic, which means it occurs on its own. And when you pick it up in scans, they will normally check for other genetic problems, and most of the time there isn't any, but they have to just do it as a precaution.
We have an SMS here. It says, do you operate only in South Africa?
We as an organization are expanding into Botswana and Namibia. We're actually holding training next week in Gaborone, and then I've been to Windhoek, and we're planning training there as well. So we are busy supporting two different, the Princess Marina Hospital in Gaborone and Windhoek Hospital in Namibia, and we're also talking to some people in a clinic in Swaziland. So we're hoping to do make quite a difference to the children across our borders. A lot of them are either untreated or they manage to come across the border for treatment, but that's only a small percentage of them who can do that. There is a program starting in Mozambique, which we are not partners in, but we do stay in touch with them. So we're trying to establish a regional awareness of clubfoot and talking to doctors all over the region. And I found that everyone has been incredibly welcoming and positive about it, and they're quite happy that we are putting this forward to them.
Of course. And in terms of funding, where do you guys source your funding if you provide all these services?
Well, it used to be until the end of last year, we were entirely self-funded, just through volunteers, through having some kind of fundraising event. But at the end of last year, we established a relationship with Miracle Feet, the NGO, and they have given us they gave us a 1-year grant, which started the end of last year, which we've been using to fund a lot of our efforts. And we've just had confirmation for a 3-year program, which we're very excited about, because it's incredibly hard to find funding.
I can imagine.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily because, when you look at other things like HIV or other, the health department is already, so inundated with health problems of different kinds. Clubfoot's quite low on the list in terms of numbers, but obviously it's not low on the list for a parent who has a child with clubfoot, or a community that has children living there with clubfoot. So we are very, very privileged to have had this money from America. Because and finally, the Miracle Feet is actually an organization started by parents like me. They also had children with club feet treated by Dr. Ponsetti, and I think the gratitude of having your child being able to run and having no disability kind of drives you to pass that on to other kids.
I can imagine. It sounds interesting. And then in terms of for the children, I can understand you get treated immediately.
Yes.
And by the time you're 4, you're okay. Is it ever too late to get the...
Well, yes, it can sometimes be too late for the Ponseti method because, as they get older and older and the bones get more and more, they get calluses and they actually build up like spurs in the actual bone, so the bone becomes deformed. Those I've seen cases like that, and there's some kids, particularly in South America, they've reported that they've managed to get teenagers with correcting with clubfoot with Ponseti, but it takes many, many, many weeks of casts. What we've managed to do is when some older children come, I think there was a 13 or 14-year-old in Johannesburg a couple of years ago with one clubfoot, and they managed to get it sort of halfway corrected, so it wasn't as bad as it was, and then they did surgery. So her foot is functional now, and it's always advisable to try the casting first, no matter how old the child or person is, just to see how much correction you can get with the casting, because it means that the final surgery that has to be done, which will be almost 99% that it's going to happen if they're over a certain age, will be less invasive than the surgery if you hadn't done any casting at all. It's quite interesting because this is a new development. It's only been in the last few years. As the Ponseti method has grown in popularity, there's more and more doctors looking at different ways of using it, because he was on his own in Iowa for 50 years before it became globally accepted that this was the right method to use and the most efficient one.
Of course. Current people want more information. How are you guys contactable?
Well, we have a website which is www.steps.org.za, and we have a Cape Town office 021 422 3471.
3471.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the best two ways to reach us. And on the website there'll be email addresses. There is another website, clubfoot.co.za, which has got more information just on clubfoot.
Okay. Clubfoot.co.za.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, and it's not related to steps.
Well, it's my website that I started 10 years ago.
All right.
So it's just to read up more stuff. So it's kind of part of Steps, but it's not on the Steps website. Otherwise, it would just become too much information on one website.
I see. Karen, thank you so much for joining us. Your time is highly appreciated. Keep up the good work. Hopefully more people will get an opportunity to know that it is treatable. Treatment is available. But before I let you go, last words to the listeners, parents, caregivers, or even adults with clubfoot. What can you say?
All I can say is that my son is living proof that the Ponseti method, if it's done by a skilled, well-trained medical professional, will have your child running and walking like any other child. And I can highly recommend that you find the clinic that will be able to do this, and you can contact us for information on who to go and see, and we will try and help you. Like I said, it does have a good result.
So if someone doesn't know where to go, they can talk to Steps. You will be able to refer them.
We work with various doctors, and we also have a parent support group on the internet, and we get a lot of feedback from those parents of what kind of treatment they're getting, and we provide emotional and practical support to parents. Whatever's needed, we will help them, and sometimes financial, depends what it is. We don't have a lot of money for that, but occasionally on a case-by-case basis, we can also help kids individually that are really in dire straits.
I see. Well, thank you so much for being here. Keep up the good work and all the best for the future.
Thanks for inviting me.
Fantastic. Well, that was Karen Moss. Karen is the founder and director of Steps SA, joining us to talk about clubfoot. Clubfoot is one of the most common musculoskeletal defects. It is reported that over 150,000 babies are born every year with clubfoot. Steps SA is a social enterprise working for the alleviation of clubfoot within the Southern Africa region. If you want more information, they are available on 021 422 3471, 021 422 3471, or you can check their website. It's www.steps.org.za, www.steps.org.za. But if you want to know more in terms of clubfoot, there is another website you can check, www.clubfoot.co.za, www.clubfoot.co.za. It's time for me to love and leave you. We'll do this again tomorrow, focusing on human rights issues. News will follow at 2 o'clock. After the news, Upasa Montawa will take over with the back chat between 2 and 4, followed by Freedom with the everyday people between 4 and 7. From me, Ubusisi Wakamtapane, thank you for listening. Please do join me again tomorrow. Bye-bye.